Yeah. Okay. Let's start with the Valley. So we're going to start with a 3-sentence summary. If you want to give your perspective on what happened in approximately 3 sentences, you can give that a go.
All right, I'm going to do my best. Tensions run high on behalf of wronged spouses from last week's nipple grab and pantsing incidents. The boys and girls both have their own nights out and in, but everything goes off the rails when Jax invites Kristen's ex, Alex, to come out with the boys. No matter who's on the screen, everyone is navigating little ones in their lives or potential little ones coming.
Oh, excellent.
Do you do this for a living?
Yeah.
Like that was
I worked really hard on these, so I'm really happy that you liked that.
Yeah, that
also,
was great.
Now that you mentioned it, isn't it really funny how this is being framed as like the more grown-up spin-off of Vanderpump Rules? And as you mentioned, the main plot points are nipple grabbing and pantsing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So right off the top, I was like, wow, these are the most immature conflicts that have ever existed in all of human history.
Yeah, that leads us into our artistic analysis, because that was the theme that I saw throughout this was, you know, that contrast between the very like middle school dynamic that all these people have with the presentation of, you know, these are people who are more adult than, you know, the sibling show Vanderpump Rules. What did you pick out?
Yeah, I got a little bit of that as well. I framed that in sort of the whole idea of change and growth, because we've got characters who presumably, again, I'm like totally new to this, but presumably all from Vanderpump Rules, or at least were connected to it in some way. And these couples that we see are all on the cusp of either new life, new children in their life, or the expectation of new children in their life. And that's kind of this move to, it's interesting because the show really seems to frame it as the suburbs for like sad moms in the suburbs, but this is, it's the San Fernando Valley is not exactly the suburbs, just to be real clear. But whatever, I bought the conceit and it was good. And I also kind of liked that that navigation of maturity is also something that the audience is probably going through, because we've been used to seeing these sort of like wine throwing gads about town, and now we're all in like baby Bjorns. And so it's changed on like the audience's side and the character side, and that was kind of a fun contrast.
Yeah, totally. Dylan, what stood out with the Valley for you?
I'm mostly just like really happy to have Jax back, just because the energy he brings. It's like, I mean, it's not exactly a fascinating observation to be like, oh, Jax is the most interesting part of the Valley. It's like saying, oh, Paul McCartney is the most interesting part of Wings. But it's just great to have him back and just have his like very manic, wounded, defensive, masculine energy, which just pops off the screen every time he's there.
Yeah, I like Jax a lot too. This is my first run-in with Jax, but he is like a shining star. I like a man you can fix. That's kind of what I go for. And Jax screams.
That one is so beyond fixing. No. That one is so beyond fixing.
No, Dylan, I can do it. I can fix him.
But that's actually one of the things that I love so much about Jax. He is like a piece of shit who just like it always says terrible things. But I feel like there's still like a bit of like self-awareness. There's still like a bit of like an actual desire to be a good person somewhere, like in that little like shriveled black heart, just assaulted from wave after wave of anabolic steroids and cocaine. Oh my God. There is a little glimmer of like love and hope somewhere in there, I think, and that's the thing that makes him a fascinating character, as much as he's like a terrible dude too. And one thing that I look forward to seeing as the show goes on is that we have like one of his friends there, Jesse, like seems to be like it's still early, so you know it's still like very prohibitive reads on these people and waiting more information. But Jesse reads to me as like just a straight up like heartless piece of shit. Just like something about like his kind of like dead-eyed stare and just like unemotional, laconic, sarcastic delivery of every line, and the way him and his wife loathe each other. It's just like, I feel like we have like one guy who is an asshole but also is completely devoid of ever having a shred of a heart, and to have that like in the mix with Jax, the asshole who might have a little sliver of a heart somewhere still down there, is like going to be a really interesting dynamic for me going forward.
Totally.
So I'm obviously the outsider for these Bravo shows, but my husband was a big watcher of $1 Million Listing. That's on Bravo, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so he watched these with me, sort of under duress, much as Jesse's wife lives in duress. And he said, "Wow, this looks like a guy who auditioned to be on $1 Million Listing and was rejected because he wasn't like cool enough."
Yeah,
Totally. I feel like there's almost like a progression that you can go through on Bravo in terms of like, if you're that type of guy early in your career, you start out on like below deck and then you move into $1 Million Listing and then you can like retire in the Valley.
That's awesome. That's incredible. I you know what? I like a good pipeline. So that's pretty good, yeah. Craig. I like that.
Yeah, I think we touched on the theme that I like stood out to me, and throughout this season of the Valley, or the first 2 episodes at least, this contrast of having this super juvenile source of conflicts that is happening while being presented with this idea that these are people that are like, you know, more mature and adults, and it seems to like permeate through the entire cast of characters, like every little thing, even down to Kristen's boyfriend Luke and how he interacts and how he's like so defensive. And it's like yes, you want to like defend your partner, but his like anger and like his moral position all seems to be stemming from this root idea that he has of what it means to be a good partner and a good like man. And it's almost this like caricature that he's striving to be, as opposed to like being like something that he has developed through his experience. That was my big takeaway.
And how good of a visual image of it is that when he like goes to the counter and orders a whiskey, traditionally the most like adult man scene, and gets in a little plastic cup because they're in an arcade like for children.
Totally.
Like they're literally hanging out at an arcade drinking whiskey out of little plastic crap cups.
I'm gonna stick with whiskey. Oh, you're drinking whiskey?
Not even Solo cups, like the crappiest plastic.
Like a
Dylan,
Chuck E. Cheese, yeah.
That did not stop my man Luke from being like, I order whiskey. The rest of your drinks are not even worth my time. I loved it. I loved him.
When I'm playing skee ball, nothing but the finest 100%. Bourbons for me.
I'm the only adult here. Like that is, he truly was going for it. He said, "This is going to be my character. Is I'm the one who's got my shit together."
It's good.
Wow.
Totally. Expect Jax to go up and order swamp water.
Yeah. Like when they sit down at the restaurant with Kristen, and Jax is like, "I'll take a cheeseburger with just cheese and ketchup only." And Kristen's like, "The way a child orders." Like, yep, Kristen, you're right. That is the way a child orders.
You lost me, Kristen. That's a perfect way to order a cheeseburger. Just, don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. Can I talk about another?
We have diverging opinions.
Can I talk about another theme that I sort of picked up on this, though, that I think the editors did a really good job with, which was telling this sort of story in a couple different parts about bodily autonomy. We've got it with Kristen's storyline as a woman who's interested in childbirth, but she's, geriatric. She's 40. Nia's storyline about historically being in this Miss Universe pageant and almost being assaulted, framed both of these storylines against the girls going to Taekwondo, which is about sort of the defense and fasting your body. And then, of course, the infamous titty twister, which was sort of the invasion of the body. And I actually really liked that these were playing in the same water.
Yeah, totally. And also the pantsing from the previous episode that we get referenced.
How could I forget?
Yeah.
The show would not let me.
Yeah. Also, I love how his penis is referred to as a pee-pee. That's just another juvenile.
I didn't even catch that, but of course you're right. Because they just kept doing it, and I was like, whatever. This is just who these people are, and you're right. But that's what you would say to a child: is your pee-pee is out. And then the last thing I picked up on was that when it came to this like pantsing incident, when it came to this titty twister, and then later when it comes to Alex coming out and being there, and Alex is the ex of
Kristen,
Kristen, who's now Luke with. It's always framed for us as the partners of these people are the ones who are upset. So for Kristen is sort of upset on behalf of Luke. Luke is upset on behalf of Kristen for the titty twister.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Nia is upset from the last episode and then still today on behalf of Danny for the pantsing, which he thought was kind of stupid, but also kind of silly.
I love the reaction, the immediate reaction to Jack's pantsing Daddy is for his wife, Nia, to start crying and run away crying in the other room. And then Daddy's reaction is to be like, oh, don't worry about it, bro. Yo, I love you, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I wondered if the show was planning on playing with this idea of transference because there's so much couple energy going into this versus Vanderpump, where it did seem to be there's a little bit of mix and match of who is in a relationship. And presumably with so many children involved, this is not going to be like a trade your spouse situation. And so one of the ways that you can tell conflict is through transference, which is this very normal reaction that we have on behalf of somebody else, but it's almost always wrong. And so like when I went to school, you have to like literally take classes on how not to experience transference to your clients.
Oh yeah. That's interesting. That's not something that I picked up on, but now that you mention it, we also sort of get a glimmer of that when towards the end of the episode, when Brittany kind of reveals that Alex is going to be at the guys' night to Kristen, and Kristen is upset on Luke's behalf, and Brittany is upset on Jack's behalf for Kristen being upset.
Yeah. You're right, because it's all by proxy though. It's like nobody is actually upset for themselves; they're all upset for someone else.
Yeah, totally. That's a really interesting dynamic. We want to do a section called Pull Quote. I want you to pick out what your favorite quote of this episode was.
Unfortunately, unlike Vanderpump Rules, where I was a little more spoiled for choice, there was only one that I wrote down that sort of made the cut, and favorite was not really what I was going for. It was just the most memorable, and I think actually kind of despicable, which was Zach describing himself as a platinum gay, talking about what that meant for new viewers in the Middle West who have like a gay nephew. And it's one of those things that I think plays well to certain audiences, but in queer communities, it's actually like a pretty misogynistic term because it's about like how the vagina is so forbidden and evil all harms come from it. And it's this really like isolated way of looking at queer identity.
Yeah, that's interesting. That stood out to me. Like that's not a term that I had ever heard, but to hear the like explanation that he gave for it contrasted with all these women who are putting out there their difficult journey through motherhood to an audience that is like mostly women. It seemed like really confrontational the way that it was framed, almost at odds with the audience.
It always is, and it's where I think like a lot of transphobia within gay male communities comes from, is this idea that the vagina, which is just a part of human anatomy and genitalia, is somehow portraying its ills upon the world and telling you what you should and should not do, and that's just not the case. Dylan, had you run into this term before, or was Zach like teaching the masses?
Yeah, he taught me something there. Wow. I did not know about that term.
Well, just to add layers, a gold star gay then is someone who is born vaginally but has never had sex with a woman, and a platinum star is born by cesarean, ergo has never touched a vagina. They're both pretty offensive.
Interesting.
So what is there silver and bronze?
Yeah, maybe like you finger a vagina. I don't know how.
Okay, all right.
Well, if I continue to watch The Valley, which spoiler alert, I will not. I would look for Zach to be a growing force of villainy, at least to my household. Though I could see him being sort of a hero to others.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned like that. His function of like teaching the masses, because I mean Brittany comes from Kentucky, and they did a spinoff of Vanderpump Rules where Jax and Brittany went to Kentucky, and I feel like there's maybe a segment of the population, especially in that region, that could use some education.
Sure.
I thought maybe am I wrong in this? I thought Zach came from Kentucky too, or did he not?
He did. Yeah.
So how come he doesn't have the accent when Brittany has such a thick, lovely accent, and Zach just doesn't have any Kentucky accent that I can detect, anyways? He just made a conscious effort to get rid of it, maybe.
It's not unusual for especially gay men in rural areas to adopt affectations to sort of signal to others that they're interested in other men as romantic or sexual partners. And so it's possible that because that's at complete odds with a Kentucky accent, and I agree, Brittany, hot as shit accent. I love a good Southern Belle accent. And if Zach had a little bit more, maybe he wouldn't be such a villain to me, but alas. or he's got it and he turns it on and off. I mean, that it's true for all of us. My Midwestern is almost completely gone unless you get me to talk about what you put in breakfast cereal, which is milk. But I don't know, you're from Canada, so you all have different accents too.
Yeah, totally. The fact that he's from Kentucky might inform some of his misogynist tendencies. I mean, this is me stereotyping a whole region of the United States that I don't really know too much about, but the trope would be that it is a bit more of a misogynist area.
You got evidence from the character. I think this is a fine interpretation. Stop giving gay white dudes a pass just because of one part of our identity. I assure you that we are quite awful.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into our highlights then. We'll start with you, David. What were your highlights here?
Well, we already talked a little bit about Jax being sort of incompetent, but I loved him. I loved that it was bookshelved. I loved that the episode opened with Jax, don't you know that your best friend from forever is a vegetarian? Why'd you go to a steakhouse? And at the end, it's all about like, oh, I'm such a dummy for inviting Alex out. And so to me, it sold his incompetence as kind of cute, which is why I wanted to fix him. And then my other one was just about all this like motherhood, and I think it was best conceptualized by this scene with Jasmine going to buy baby stuff. Wish Jasmine was in more of this episode. I found her a lot of fascinating, but at one point in time we get a cutaway to a confessional of her just being like, holy shit, I thought I was just picking out the color of the crib. Like, babies are fucking complicated. And chef's kiss, love her. No notes.
Yeah. The point that you made about like Jax's incompetence being played off as cute is such an accurate like encapsulation of him. It's a way that he's able to like weaponize his incompetence, and I think that he plays this to perfection, both like in his relationship, but also within the structure of reality TV. Like we saw him making the decision to invite Alex out because he knew it was going to create drama, and just playing it off like he's just being a dummy who wants everyone to be friends. It's clearly like a veteran reality TV star move that he knows he can like cause problems. He's got Kristen there. He knows all the buttons to push with her, and so he's going to do that.
Yeah, that is such a classic Jax move, to do something which is, to be clear, intentionally malicious, and then when he gets called out about it, just like start like frantically being like, what? Why? I never would have considered that. That never came. Oh, I'm so stupid. Why did that idea consider what? I didn't think that you might be uncomfortable. It never occurred to me. Oh my God. Yeah. That's just classic Jax. Like, the entire reason he did that was to make Luke uncomfortable 100%. And it's just so odd character for him to like adopt that frantic, incompetent persona when people point out that's clearly what he did.
This is so funny to me because in my memory, I only watched this once. I'm so sorry to both of you. I couldn't do a second run. In my memory, when he got called out about the whole Alex thing, and I know he didn't do this, I just know this is how I remembered it. He put both of his hands in his back pockets and he sort of kicked and looked at the ground and was like, oh, shucks, guys. I didn't mean to do that. And I know that's not what happened, but in my mind, that's what happened. And so, and I don't disagree. It's totally malicious. I have seen reality TV before. I know what's happening here, but to me, it was sold to me through editing and through storytelling that this was just a goofball, not a evil, diabolical mastermind. And you have so much more history with this guy. So like, it's awesome for both of us to have those two different reads.
Yeah, it's impressive what he's able to do, because you're not the only person that is sold on this idea, because his wife, Brittany, who has even more context about his history, is sold on this and is even like trying to sell the story to Kristen that, oh, it's such a big deal that Jax would want, him to come along. It says so much about how he values Luke, which is like complete bullshit. But Brittany like seems to authentically like believe this.
God bless her. God bless her heart.
I think we covered most of my highlights. Did you guys have any other highlights before we pick our stars?
I just, you know what? Sorry, not totally done talking about Jax. Just love to have him back. But one thing that I am really enjoying about the first 2 episodes of The Valley is that it was always one of my favorite kind of subtle subplots in Vanderpump Rules, that Jax and Kristen were always kind of perfect for each other. Like they both had like a bit of a they both were kind of manic and both unreliable and a little egotistical, but they also have this long history together and they're really good friends. And I always feel like in that like black and shriveled little shard of a heart for Jax, he always has a bit of room for Kristen, and I think that's something that we're seeing being elaborated a little bit more here. Not that he like wants to get together with Kristen, but I think that's motivating him, like not wanting her to have a lifelong partner that she'll have children with. Like, I think he likes the idea of her like never settling down, because he just like he likes to have her around as like somebody who's not completely tied up with another man kind of thing, I think. And I feel like that's kind of a motivating factor for him. Completely, try to pull the limbs off Luke in the way that he knows how. He smells blood in the water with Luke. He knows this guy's not as ruthless and hard-edged as like him and some of his other friends are, and he knows how to toy with him. And I think that a lot of that is probably coming from a place of a kind of love that he has for Kristen. Not a healthy kind at all, but there's a reason why I think he doesn't really want Kristen to settle down, and it's not just entirely like thinking of her and being like, oh, are you sure it's the right person or whatever. Like, I don't know. We need to see more of this Luke guy, but he's definitely seems to be like the least asshole-ish of the many assholes we've seen Kristen date in the past. So that's something in his favor, I guess. For a while.
I kind of got asshole vibes from him, like one of those people that has like asshole like simmering under the surface. I don't know. That was my initial gut reaction.
I think that I think Luke gave us a couple flavors of asshole that are really aligned with this like toxic idea of masculinity. And there are 2 points of evidence from this episode, which is all I'm giving Luke. One is his overreaction to the titty twister, and being like, I am offended as the man who owns this woman that this happened to her. Don't love that. And then number 2 is the drink order thing of just how much sneer he delivered with like, no, I'll have a whiskey, like a man. Which, don't get me wrong, a whiskey is good. Like there's nothing wrong with ordering a whiskey. Just don't think that you're ordering something that isn't booze. Like, just calm down.
The
other thing that I didn't know where to put this, but watching these side by side was so interesting to me, because this show is shot like the second episode of a brand new series in such a way that like before every commercial break, it was like, don't worry, we're coming back with more. Don't leave just because you have to learn about these Skechers that you put on without touching them. You have to come back. You have to come back. And then the end was such a to be continued that even though I feel like the Vanderpump Rules episode actually had a better cliffhanger from a plot perspective, this story was shot and edited in a way that was like, if you don't watch the next episode, you might die.
Yeah, totally. There's like more of a desperation to the edit.
Yeah,
totally.
Get that's normal, because other than like Jax and Kristen, these are a bunch of people that we don't really know yet. So I feel like they must feel like they need to hook the audience more with new characters that we have to get to know and haven't had the time to get to know yet.
Let's get into our stars. David, we'll start with you. Who are your 3 stars from this episode?
Yeah, I mean, then I've got to give it first and foremost to my man Jax, who was in my heart and stood out to me and really like elevated the storylines that were going on, because he was like the driving force of conflict.
Yeah, totally.
And then I'm only going to give one more, and it's Jasmine, because she was perfect to me. I hope there's more Jasmine in the future.
Yeah, I like Jasmine a lot as well. Dylan, who were your stars?
I'm gonna have to give first star to Jax Taylor. It's just so much stuff going on. The little scene where he plays hockey too, and they last for 4 minutes was great too. Remember the time that Jax like tried to convince everybody he was gonna move out of LA because he had he pretended he had a job doing PR for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind everybody of that. That was really
I
funny.
hate that. You're ruining Jax for me.
He'll do that all on his own if you watch enough of these episodes. Don't worry. After that, you got Kristen. Yeah, I also haven't talked about her as much, but also delighted to have her energy back as well. And let's give a 3rd star to our boy Luke Colorado. Who, as Kristen says, do you know his last name, where he's from? Yeah, the answer to both is Colorado. It's Luke Colorado. Wow. Yeah, it was fun to have him there too.
My number 1 star has to be Jax Taylor. Like you said, great to have him back. Same with Kristen, who would be my number 2. I got to give number 3 to Jesse, just because he seems like he is emerging as a really great toxic figure on these shows. And this is my outlet for toxicity in my life. So glad to see some fresh poison on the channel. Love it.
Yeah, I do enjoy how Jesse and Michelle just hate each other. It just seems to be a marriage just full of hate. When they're doing the little riding the bike thing, teaching the kid how to ride a bike, and he's did you look at the YouTube video I sent you about how to teach a kid how to ride a bike? No. You put their feet on the pedals. Wow, that's actually the opposite of what it said. It's so great. Also, just a little quick shout out. I really like how Michelle says a statement that I hear, all the time from people who are married with kids, understandably, I'm sure. But she says, nobody tells you how hard it is to raise a kid and have a happy marriage. And I feel like everybody tells you that.
Yeah, that's the number
everybody
one thing
tells you that, and everybody further tells you that nobody tells you that. Yeah. Why are you people not listening to each other?
Yeah. Except counterpoint to that is that it pretty much immediately cut to Danny being yeah, whatever. Well, the kid's got to sleep eventually. I'll play Xbox when he sleeps. No big deal.
Yeah.
And Danny, you know what? Danny could take my 3rd star place, because I also was enjoying Danny for what he gave us in this episode. Sadly, not a lot, but
he's showing so much subservience to Jax too, just being please don't be angry at me for the thing you did to me. It's he's really funny to me too.
You brought up the moment of the bike training, and that's one that I had forgotten about, but there's nothing more no more frustrating dynamic than putting a lot of effort into researching something and then have someone else come in with a super strong opinion about how to do something and completely override you. And to have that dynamic within a partnership would be very frustrating.
But I think that part of the frustration, listen, if this, I used to do couples therapy. If this couple came in, I would just shut my doors and hide. There were missionaries knocking on the door. I have no interest in this. But I think part of it is that her willingness to do research, Michelle's willingness to do research, that is sort of blown off by Jesse being I'll just inherently know this. There's also a layer of patriarchy associated with that, and a little bit of Dunning-Kruger. That's just of course I'll know because I'm incompetent, and ergo I will know. And that's I don't know, that's I think going to be something that continues to develop as a negative in their relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting to see how often that dynamic is accompanied with this weaponized incompetence, being both I am so bad at things, you do it, whereas also I know everything just inherently. I don't need to research it, and I'm right.
Yeah.